My name is Peter Godwin Chance, named after my father and family, and I was born in Ottawa in 1920, 24th of November. I was in the Naval Reserve in Ottawa, thanks to a next-door neighbor, and I subsequently entered the Naval Reserve division in Ottawa as the midshipman, which is the lowest non-commissioned officer. Subsequently, I became a sub-lieutenant, and in due course I became a lieutenant, and I took courses to become a specialist navigator. But I then went on to serve in Skeena until, that was in May 43, and I was with her until she was lost in September 44. I came ashore and went to Ottawa. I was a director of navigation, and I taught navigation and aircraft control at the Naval Air Station in Shearwater in 1960. So for me, it was a never-ending round of very interesting appointments. I was very much taken with the idea of the Navy, so when I went down to Halifax in June 1940 for summer training, sure enough, I met a wonderful guy named Ted Ord, with O-R-D-E, who had lost an eye during the Halifax explosion, and who, amongst other things, carried a little box of eyes, each one more bloodshot than the next one. The last one painted with a Union Jack, and he used to, as the party wore on in the wardroom, and we were all getting very jolly, he would change his eyes, and he'd end up with his pièce de résistance Union Jack. Terrible. Anyway, it was a source of great amusement. With a group of 14 other guys, we were all sent over to England, and we did courses and we tramped around all over the place. I was sent to a ship called Mauritius, and Mauritius was a colony-class cruiser with 12 6-inch, 8 4-inch torpedo tubes, a ship's company of about 600, and we went from Scapa down to Gibraltar, to Freetown, West Africa, down to the Cape and up to Durban, Mombasa, and to Aden, and eventually ending up in Singapore in the dry dock. I then came back to Canada, and May 43, I joined Skeena. And from May 43 until the time she was lost in Reykjavik off Iceland, I was started off as a Joe boy, and the engineer officer was a hell of a nice guy, Johnny Long. He called me a half-baked limey because I spoke with a very marked UK accent. Hello, chaps, and all that sort of thing, you don't know. Anyway, I got that fixed up pretty quickly. And through to the end of 42, before I joined, the Germans were winning. They were knocking off ships like crazy, and the UK was down to 3 weeks before they had to capitulate. But thank goodness, by the turn of 43, the quality of our, or the capability, I should say, of our escorts was improved immensely. We had HFDF, high definition warning surface. We had a better command and control. We had a thing called TBS, which is talk between ships, and that was a terrific improvement. And by the time the war was over, 750 U-boats were sunk and 43 Kriegsmarine were drowned, which was dreadful. But there was one time when I was on passage going back to the UK in a ship called Seacliff. They had what they called squid, and they could fire these bombs from the quarterdeck over the top of the ship, ahead of the ship, so that when it landed, it got to a depth where the submarine was. And of course, that took care of the submarine. We also had a thing called hedgehog. And hedgehog was fitted in our ship in Skeena, which, when it was fired from the forecastle on spigots, it cast a ring of bombs over the target. And that was very effective as well. In preparation for D-Day, I was in Londonderry, where we had 5 jetties, 5 ships deep at each jetty. And when, as they say, the balloon went up, why, we all trooped out of Derry in line ahead and down past into the Irish Sea and down to the channels. When D-Day hit, of course, we were all moved out into our positions. But before that happened, the weather was terrible. So the great armada of ships coming in to land in front of the beaches of Normandy had to turn back. And they went out to sea again, they turned around, and they came in the next day. Then they were able to get alongside and open up the bombardment. Anyway, all that was very exciting for a lot of us. And yours truly, as a young 20-year-old and a bit, it was quite an eye-opener and part of my history that I remember very vividly. We could see the beach. We were all in a line and firing, and we had bigger vessels, cruisers and battleships behind us, and they were firing over us with 1-ton bombs. And we had 4.7 pea shooters in comparison. But we all added to the not only the noise but the effectiveness to assist the guys landing. Our duty was to prevent submarines from getting into the channel, to harass our people. So when the British intelligence told us that there was going to be an evacuation of flak ships coming out of Brest Harbor, which was very heavily fortified, they came out, the submarines came out, protected on both sides by what they call flak ships. These were heavily armed trawlers that had all kinds of anti-aircraft stuff with them. And when at a vantage point for us, we opened fire on them, and that was the end of those guys. And so we protected our people getting up into the channel. Somebody said, "Hey, wait a minute, we got a guy up here trying to get into us." It was a Heinkel, and he had a device which would allow him to home in on us. And so here he comes in, and we're zigging and zagging a bit. But the main feature was when he dumped his glider bomb, he controlled it. And that glider bomb came down between 2 rows of our ships. For us, it just turned the ship on its side. We lost vacuum. We were stopped dead in the water. Everybody went on, and when we got vacuum again, of course, we were going like the clappers, And so we were going ahead, and the senior officer eventually said, "Slow down, wait for us." And that's how it was as we got into the darkness. The senior officer ordered us to go into harbor, and the weather was getting worse by the minute. And I said to my captain, "Sir, I have to ask to be relieved of my duties as your navigator, because we've been in here before, and we've got a volcanic ash bottom. We can only use one anchor because we have a centerline capstan. Everybody else has got a capstan for each of their cables. They can use both anchors. We can only use one." And so he said, "Well, pilot, I take your views, but will you try to put her into what is considered to be the safest position?" So I did. We were 800 yards from the beach through 360 degrees. And I was on the bridge. I stayed there for an hour, and she held. Don't forget, it's blowing 100 miles an hour. And with snow flurries, couldn't see a goddamn thing. And there was only one light on which to take bearings, but that even was no good. So eventually I went aft. And my best pal, Bill Kidd, was incidentally the best man at my wedding, was on the bridge. Well, the next thing that happened was crushed with the ground. And what had happened was that she dragged, and as she dragged with that 100 miles, we gathered speed, and we hit the putty doing 8 knots. And she leaned into the sea with each wave, it crashed and went above, and it broke her back. And we had oil on the upper deck, and it was very frightening because it was pitch black, don't forget. And some guys decided to try to get ashore in a Carly float. Well, a bunch of them went, but 15 didn't make it. And they're still up there. I remember seeing a picture of me at the funeral, but I don't remember being there. We were all in shock. But anyhow, yeah, it was a pretty emotional time. I remember it was cold. It was in up around Reykjavik. When Skeena was lost, we went down into the canteen because as a secondary job, I was the canteen officer. So we opened up the safe with all the water and God knows around us, and we got a sack of money, 50 pounds worth, LBS pounds, and another sack full of notes, 5 pound, 10 notes. We took all this loot to the, what was it called? NAFI, the Navy Army Air Force Institute. And we presented ourselves with all this stuff, and we said, "We're from Skeena, you know." Very quiet. "Yes, we know all about you." "Oh, yeah, sure. We're glad to have you back." And so, well, I said, "We got all this money." He said, No, it's all yours. It's all insured, it's yours." So, Jesus, we looked at one another and thought, we're going to have ourselves one hell of a party. But no, calmer heads prevailed, and we divided it up amongst the 15 families of the guys who were lost. And that's where the money went. We were all very close-knit family. And that was what it was all about. The Navy was a family. Londonderry was our home port, as it were, on what we call the Newfie Run. And the North Atlantic was bloody murdered during the winter time. When we were alongside in Londonderry, a bunch of us jumped in a jeep, and off we went to a little place called Port Rush. It was a little village on the coast, and a restaurant called the Trocadero in there. And there were 3 girls sitting across the room, and the shyest member of our crowd took a note over saying, "Would you 3 Irish colleens care to have supper with us?" And the note came back, and one of them sung out, "We're not Irish colleens, we're English wrens, and yes, we're hungry." And I sat this girl down beside me, and I took one look at her and said, "My God, I'm going to marry you." We were married 6 weeks later, and she was with me till she died in 96. Well, it's a record of the trials and tribulations of a wartime sailor, I guess. But I considered myself so bloody lucky, you know. And people were very supportive to the old guy. And I look back on it, and I think for others following in my footsteps, the kind of examples that I had, that they might be of use to other generations coming forward.